The first time my mother asked to borrow money, I was 11 years old. She needed $20 for groceries, she said, but I watched her spend it on scratch-off lottery tickets at the corner store. That was the moment I started keeping receipts. I'm Sasha, and I've spent the last 3 years renovating my childhood home. The same house where I learned to hide emergency cash in hollowed out books and empty tampon boxes. Every replaced floorboard and fresh coat of paint feels like reclaiming a piece of myself from the chaos my mother left behind. The call came on a Sunday morning while I was stripping wallpaper in the dining room. My boyfriend Archer was helping, his t-shirt already spotted with adhesive remover. Sasha, baby? My mother's voice carried that familiar syrupy sweetness that always preceded a request. I need to talk to you about something important. I pressed my forehead against the half-stripped wall, closing my eyes. What is it, Mom? Virgil left me. A theatrical sob crackled through the speaker. He cleared out our joint accounts. I have nowhere to go. Archer paused his scraping, watching me with concern. He knew our history, the endless IOUs, the borrowed college fund, the credit card she'd opened in my name when I was 17. That's terrible, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Have you called London? Your sister's place is too small, but the house, our old house, you have so much space now that you fixed it up. My fingers tightened around the phone. The house I bought from the bank after you let it go into foreclosure? Water under the bridge, sweetie. I just need somewhere to stay until I get back on my feet. A month, tops? I caught my reflection in the window. Paint in my hair, determination in my eyes. I'll need to think about it. But I'll call you back. I hung up before she could protest. Archer set down his scraper. You okay? She's broke again. I ripped off a stubborn strip of wallpaper with more force than necessary. Virgil finally wizened up and left her. And she wants to move in here? Where else? She's burned every other bridge in town. I gestured around the room. 3 years of savings, weekends, and bloody knuckles to make this place mine again. And now she wants to waltz back in like she owns it. Natasha arrived an hour later with coffee and sympathy. She perched on my kitchen counter, watching me pace. Remember when she borrowed $2,000 for emergency dental work? Natasha asked, making air quotes, then showed up with new highlights and a designer purse? I remember everything. I pulled a worn leather notebook from my desk drawer. Every loan, every broken promise, every time she chose scratch-offs over groceries. I've documented it all. Archer whistled as he flipped through the pages. You've been keeping track since you were a kid? Had to. She'd always claim she paid me back when she hadn't. I took a sip of coffee. $23,412? That's how much she owes me, not counting interest. So tell her no, Natasha said. You don't owe her anything. But it wasn't that simple. Despite everything, she was still my mother. And maybe that's what made me pick up the phone and call Edward, our old family lawyer. I have an idea, I told him, but I'll need your help drafting an agreement. Later that night, after Archer and Natasha left, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen. Everything gleamed, the marble countertops I'd saved for months to afford, the subway tiles I'd laid myself, the vintage light fixtures I'd restored. This house represented every step I'd taken away from being that scared little girl hiding money in books. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, London. Mom called me crying. Says you're ignoring her. What's going on? I typed back, working on a solution. Trust me. Opening my notebook, I started a new entry. Maybe it was time to stop documenting and start collecting. My mother had taught me many things over the years. How to spot a con, how to budget down to the penny, how to protect myself. Now I would show her just how well I'd learned those lessons. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. Mom, you can stay here. I paused, letting her start to thank me. But we need to discuss terms first.
The silence on the other end told me she understood. This time would be different. In control, my mother arrived the next morning in a taxi, designer luggage scratched and worn. She stood on my porch, our old porch, looking smaller than I remembered. Her carefully maintained dark roots. Oh, sweetie, she said, arms outstretched. You've done wonders with the place.
I stepped back from her attempted embrace, gesturing to her bags. I'll show you to the guest room. Archer appeared behind me, reaching for the largest suitcase. My mother's eyes lit up at the sight of him. And who is this handsome young man? Mom, you've met Archer 3 times. Of course, of course. She laughed that theatrical laugh of hers. I'm just scattered today. You understand? The guest room was the smallest bedroom, deliberately sparse with just a twin bed and dresser. I'd removed the antique vanity she would have loved. No need to encourage her to settle in. It's cozy, she said, running a finger along the dresser top. Though I was hoping to take my old room. That's my office now. I crossed my arms. We need to talk about the terms of your stay. Terms? She sat on the bed, crossing her legs elegantly. Darling, I'm your mother. Exactly why we need clear boundaries this time. I pulled out my phone, checking the time. Edward will be here in an hour to go over the rental agreement. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. Edward, the lawyer? Sasha, surely we don't need. We do. I turned to leave. Unpack. I'll call you when he arrives. In the kitchen, Archer was making coffee. You okay? She's already trying to manipulate her way into a bigger room. I leaned against the counter, watching him measure beans. Did you see how she pretended not to remember you? Classic power play. He smiled. Good thing I'm not easily offended. The doorbell rang precisely at 11. Edward hadn't changed much since he'd handled my house purchase. Still the same wire-rimmed glasses, the same briefcase he'd carried for 20 years. Sasha, he nodded, then called out, Rosalie, you're looking well. My mother descended the stairs like she was making an entrance on stage. Edward, what a surprise, though I don't understand why we need lawyers for a simple family matter. Please sit down. I gestured to the dining room table, the one I'd refinished myself after finding it at a garage sale. Would anyone like coffee? Just get to the point, Sasha. My mother sighed. What are these terms you keep mentioning? Edward opened his briefcase, removing a thick document. Rosalie, your daughter is prepared to offer you temporary accommodation under certain conditions. I pulled out my leather notebook, the pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. I've kept track of every loan since I was 11. $23,412 in principal, with compound interest at a very reasonable 8%. Interest? My mother's voice rose an octave. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I slid the notebook across the table. Every date, amount, and broken promise documented. Remember the time you borrowed my first paycheck from the ice cream shop to pay the electric bill? Page 12. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. This is ridiculous. I'm your mother, not some bank. No, a bank would have required collateral. Edward adjusted his glasses. Sasha is offering you a place to stay in exchange for a payment plan to settle these debts. And if I refuse, then you'll need to find alternative accommodation. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I hear London's couch is available. My mother's facade cracked slightly. You know her apartment is too small, and all my friends are. She trailed off. Tired of lending you money? I finished for her. She stared at the document, then at me, then back at the document. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The same look she'd get before convincing someone to just loan her a little more, just this once. How much per month? She finally asked. $500, plus helping with utilities. I pushed the agreement toward her. You'll have 3 months to find a job and your own place. 500. That's highway robbery. Actually, Edward interjected, given the total amount owed and current rental markets, it's quite generous. My mother's lips trembled. I raised you better than this. No, Mom. I stood up, gathering my notebook. I raised myself better than this. Sign the agreement or start calling your friends. Your choice. She picked up the pen, hand shaking. As she signed her name, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that this was necessary. Sometimes the only way to heal old wounds is to reopen them first. The first week with my mother under my roof felt like walking on broken glass. She spent most of her time in the guest room, emerging only for dramatic sighs and pointed comments about the harsh rental agreement. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she finally decided to engage. Something smells wonderful, she said, hovering in the doorway. Grandma Rose's lasagna recipe. I layered noodles methodically, not looking up. The one you always claimed you lost. Found in that box of papers you kept in the attic, I suppose? She moved closer, peering over my shoulder. You always were obsessive about keeping things. Funny how those obsessive habits helped me buy back our house. I sprinkled cheese over the top layer. By the way, your first payment is due Friday. She stiffened. About that, I was thinking, no, you haven't even heard what I was going to say. I turned to face her. Let me guess, you need more time or maybe a lower payment. Perhaps we could work something out. I have a job interview tomorrow, she said, switching tactics, at the mall, but I won't get paid for 2 weeks after I start. You have savings. I opened the oven. Or did Virgil really take everything? Her silence was answer enough. I slid the lasagna onto the middle rack and set the timer. Sasha, her voice softened to that familiar, coaxing tone. Can't we just be mother and daughter again, without all this business between us? Like when I was 16 and you took my college fund to invest in your friend's foolproof makeup pyramid scheme. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Or when I was 21 and you convinced me to co-sign on a car you never made payments on. The doorbell rang before she could respond. Archer walked in with Natasha carrying wine and garlic bread. Perfect timing, I called out. Dinner's almost ready. My mother's demeanor shifted instantly, her smile brightening. Natasha, darling, and Arthur, was it? Archer, he corrected, setting the bread on the counter. Nice to see you again, Rosalie. We gathered around my dining room table, the one she'd pawned years ago that I'd tracked down and restored. Natasha poured wine while my mother regaled us with stories about her upcoming job interview. It's in management, of course, she said, twirling pasta on her fork. They were very impressed with my experience. What experience? The words slipped out before I could stop them. She faltered slightly. Well, all those years helping run your father's business. Dad left when I was 4, I interrupted, and Virgil never let you near his company. Sasha, Archer whispered, touching my arm. But I couldn't stop. Years of pent-up frustration spilled out like wine on white carpet. In fact, Mom, I called Virgil yesterday. The color drained from her face. You what? He told me some interesting things about your joint accounts, about how you'd been siphoning money for months before he left, about the credit cards he knew nothing about. That's private, like the private conversations you had with my bank when I was 17. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through texts. Virgil sent me screenshots of the transfers, quite a paper trail. Natasha and Archer exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we should go. Natasha started to rise. No, stay. My mother's voice had gone cold. I want witnesses to how cruel my daughter has become, using my personal problems against me, forcing me to pay interest on family loans. Family loans? I laughed, a harsh sound. Is that what we're calling it now? I did the best I could as a single mother. You did the best you could at taking advantage of a child who couldn't say no. My voice cracked. Do you know what it's like to check your credit score at 18 and find it destroyed? To have to explain to college financial aid officers why your own mother maxed out credit cards in your name? Silence fell over the table. The lasagna grew cold on our plates. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, over and over. I stood up, gathering plates. The payment is due Friday. No extensions, no excuses. If you can't pay, you can't stay. She pushed back her chair, tears gathering in her eyes. You've become so hard, Sasha, so cold. No, Mom, I've become strong. There's a difference. After she fled upstairs, Natasha helped me clean while Archer packed up the leftover lasagna. You okay? Natasha asked, loading the dishwasher. I nodded, though my hands shook as I wrapped the garlic bread. I had to say it, all of it. I know, she hugged me tightly. And tomorrow, you'll keep holding that line. Because that's what this was really about. Not just money or revenge, but finally drawing boundaries that should have been drawn long ago. London showed up unannounced the next morning, her dark hair wild from the wind, eyes blazing. What the hell are you doing to Mom? I stepped aside to let her in, noting how much she looked like our mother when angry. Coffee? Don't play nice with me. She followed me to the kitchen. She called me crying last night, said you're charging her interest on money she borrowed to feed us. Is that what she told you? I pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. Did she mention the time she borrowed $3,000 from my savings account for emergency car repairs and bought herself a hot tub? That was years ago. That was last year. I slid her coffee across the counter. Black, 2 sugars, unless that's changed too. London wrapped her hands around the mug, deflating slightly. She says you're being cruel. Of course she does. That's her go-to move when manipulation doesn't work. I leaned against the counter. Why didn't you let her stay with you? I... She stared into her coffee. My apartment's too small. London. Fine, because she still owes me rent from the last time she stayed with me. Happy? Footsteps on the stairs announced our mother's arrival. She froze when she saw London, then rushed forward with open arms. Baby, you came to see me. Mom. London accepted the hug stiffly. We need to talk about this situation. Isn't it awful? Our mother dabbed at her eyes with an imaginary tissue. Your sister's treating me like some kind of criminal. I'm treating you like an adult who needs to take responsibility, I corrected. Did you tell London about the job interview? Oh, that, she waved dismissively. The position wasn't quite right for me, but I have another prospect. Mom, London slammed her mug down. You need a job, any job. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? This, London gestured wildly. The crying, the excuses, the promises you never keep. I'm still paying off the credit card debt from when you lived with me. Our mother's face crumpled. Not you too, my own daughters, turning against me. My phone buzzed. A text from Edward. Virgil called. More documents found. Need to meet. I have to go out, I announced. Mom, remember, rent's due tomorrow. But I haven't found a job yet. Not my problem. I grabbed my keys. London, want to come with me? In Edward's office, surrounded by manila folders and legal papers, the full scope of our mother's financial manipulation became clear. These are loan applications dating back 15 years. Edward spread documents across his desk. All using your social security number, Sasha. London picked up a paper, eyes widening. This one's in my name. I never applied for this loan. There's more. Edward adjusted his glasses. Virgil discovered she'd been writing checks from his business account, To pay off some of these debts. That's why he left. How much? I asked. Total unauthorized loans and credit lines? He consulted his notes. Just over $100,000. London sank into a chair. I think I'm going to be sick. We can press charges, Edward said gently. Identity theft is a serious crime. No. I gathered the documents, but we can use this. Back home, we found our mother in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags. What's all this? London demanded. Just a few necessities. She pulled out a silk blouse. The store was having a sale. With what money? I picked up a receipt. Mom, this is from my credit card. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I borrowed it from your wallet this morning. I was going to tell you. That's it. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I held up the files from Edward. I have proof of identity theft spanning 15 years. Either you return everything and start taking this seriously, or I press charges. She looked from me to London, searching for an ally. Finding none, she crumpled onto the couch. I'll return it all, first thing tomorrow. No. London grabbed the bags. We're returning it now. I'm driving. After they left, I sat in my restored living room, surrounded by the life I'd built despite her best efforts to derail it. My phone lit up with a text from Archer. Proud of you for standing your ground. I typed back, thanks, but this isn't over. Because with our mother, it never was. Each victory was just a prelude to another battle, another scheme, another test of boundaries. But this time, I wasn't fighting alone. And maybe that would make all the difference. The attic had always been my refuge. As a kid, I'd hide up here when bill collectors came knocking, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten memories. Now, searching through those same boxes, I was looking for answers. Need help? Archer called from the attic stairs. Yeah, grab that box marked tax records. I wiped sweat from my forehead. Mom never threw away paperwork, her one good habit. We'd been sorting through decades of documents for hours when I found it. A worn leather portfolio stuffed with investment papers. Holy shit! I flipped through the pages. These are stock certificates, tech companies from the 90s. Archer peered over my shoulder. Are they worth anything? They were. I checked the dates. Mom sold them in 2005, right when I started high school. The same year she claimed we were too broke for me to join the volleyball team. More digging revealed bank statements, property deeds, and investment reports. The picture they painted was far different from the desperate single mother story I'd grown up hearing. Sasha? My mother's voice drifted up the stairs. What are you doing up there? I grabbed the portfolio and headed down. She stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, nervously twisting her rings. Finding some interesting reading material. I held up the portfolio. Want to explain these? Her face went pale. Where did you get that? Remember when you told me Dad left us nothing? That we were barely surviving? I pulled out a stock certificate. Looks like he left quite a bit, actually. Those documents are private, like the credit cards you opened in my name. I spread the papers across the kitchen table. You had money, Mom, real money. So why did you keep borrowing? Why did you let us think we were poor? She sank into a chair. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I slammed my hand on the table. Explain why I spent my childhood terrified of answering the phone, thinking we'd end up homeless, while you had thousands in investments. Archer touched my shoulder. I'll give you two some space. After he left, my mother seemed to deflate. I was scared. Of what? Of being like my mother. She twisted her rings faster. She died penniless in a nursing home because she gave everything away to her children. I swore I'd never be dependent on anyone. So instead, you made everyone dependent on you. I needed to know you'd always need me. Her voice cracked. That you wouldn't leave like your father did. That's twisted, Mom. I sat down across from her. You created artificial scarcity to keep us under your control. Not control, protection. The world is harsh, Sasha. I wanted you to be prepared. By destroying my credit, by stealing my savings. That's not protection, that's abuse. She flinched at the word. I love you. Everything I did. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't say it was for my own good. Love doesn't do this. I pulled out my phone and called Edward. Can you come over? We need to revise the agreement. An hour later, we sat around the same table where we'd signed the original rental agreement. Edward reviewed the new documents I'd found. This changes things considerably, he said. These investments would have covered all your debts, Rosalie. Instead, you chose to burden your daughters. I was investing in other opportunities, like pyramid schemes and gambling. I interrupted. I found the casino receipts too. Edward cleared his throat. Given this new information, Sasha has every right to pursue legal action. My mother's hands trembled. You wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. I pulled out a new document. But I am adjusting our agreement. The rent just doubled. That's impossible. I can barely afford. You'll find a way. I stood up. You always do when it's something you want badly enough. And right now, you want to stay here because you have nowhere else to go. She signed the new agreement with tears streaming down her face. Not the theatrical tears I'd grown up with, but quiet, defeated ones that made her look old and small. Later, after Edward left and my mother retreated to her room, Archer found me in the attic again. You okay? No. I leaned against him. I thought getting revenge would feel better than this. Maybe it's not about revenge anymore. He was right. This had stopped being about revenge somewhere between the stock certificates and my mother's tears. Now it was about something harder, forcing her to face the consequences of her actions, even if it hurt us both in the process. I closed the leather portfolio, tucking it away with the other evidence of my mother's deceptions. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new manipulations, new tests of will. But for now, in my refuge among the dust and memories, I let myself feel the bittersweet victory of finally seeing the truth. She got a job, London announced, bursting into my office without knocking. An actual, real job. I looked up from my laptop. Where? The department store at the mall, cosmetics counter. London perched on my desk. 20 hours a week, minimum wage plus commission. It's something, I admitted, though it won't cover the new rent. About that. London fidgeted with my pencil holder. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? Before I could respond, Natasha appeared in the doorway. Girls' night? I brought wine. Perfect timing. I closed my laptop. I need a break from all this. We settled in my living room, careful to keep our voices down since my mother was upstairs. Natasha poured generous glasses of red wine while London raided my kitchen for snacks. So, Natasha said, curling up on the couch, how's Operation Karma going? Mom's actually trying, London reported, returning with chips and dip. She went to 3 interviews this week, and she hasn't asked to borrow money once. Because she knows I'll say no. I swirled my wine, but she's still working angles. Yesterday, she told Archer about her terrible arthritis and how she can't possibly clean her own bathroom. Classic Mom. London laughed, then grew serious. But I found something interesting in her room today. You snooped? I was helping her organize. But look, she pulled a crumpled paper from her pocket. It's a letter from Virgil's lawyer. I smoothed out the paper, reading aloud. Regarding the unauthorized withdrawals, legal action pending, requirement for immediate repayment. She's in deeper trouble than we thought, London said softly. Natasha leaned forward. How much does she owe him? According to this, nearly 50,000. Jesus. London grabbed the letter back. No wonder she's desperate. That's not our problem, I started, but Natasha cut me off. Isn't it? She's still your mother. A mother who stole from her children. I'm not defending her. Natasha topped off our glasses. But maybe this is your chance to break the cycle. Show her a better way. A key turned in the front door. Archer, returning from his evening run. He took in our serious faces and the wine bottles. Emergency meeting? Mom's in trouble with Virgil, London explained. Legal trouble. Ah. He sat on the arm of my chair. And you're debating whether to help? There's nothing to debate. I stood up, pacing. She made her bed, like she made your bed when you were 7? London interrupted. Or packed your lunches, or sat up with you all night when you had chicken pox. That's what mothers are supposed to do. Yes, and they're also not supposed to steal from their kids or lie about money. London set down her wine. But people are complicated, Sasha. Even Mom. The stairs creaked, and we all fell silent as my mother appeared, wearing a department store uniform. Oh, she startled at seeing us all. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just finished my first training shift. Something about seeing her in that polyester vest, makeup slightly smudged from a long day, made my throat tight. How was it? London asked. Humbling. She smoothed her vest self-consciously. The manager's half my age, but I sold 3 premium skincare sets. That's great, Mom, I heard myself say. She brightened at my praise, then seemed to remember our usual dynamic and stiffened. Well, I should get some rest. Early shift tomorrow. After she disappeared upstairs, Archer squeezed my shoulder. You know, there's a difference between enabling and helping. What do you mean? Maybe instead of just punishing her, you could teach her. He shrugged. You're good with money. She's clearly not. Financial literacy lessons from the daughter she stole from? I laughed bitterly. That would be ironic. But potentially healing, Natasha pointed out. For both of you. London gathered our wine glasses. Remember what you told me when I was learning to drive? Sometimes you have to crash a few times before you learn to steer straight. That was about parallel parking, not financial fraud. Same principle. She rinsed the glasses. Mom's finally crashed. Maybe now she's ready to learn. I walked to the window, staring at the street where I'd once watched repo men take our car, where I'd hidden birthday money in the bushes so Mom couldn't borrow it, where I'd sworn I'd never be like her. I'll think about it, I said finally, because maybe they were right. Maybe there was a middle ground between enabling and revenge, between forgiveness and accountability. I just had to find it. A budget meeting? My mother stared at the spreadsheets I'd laid out on the dining room table. On my day off? Consider it part of your rental agreement. I pointed to the chair across from me. Sit. Edward had helped me prepare the documents, income projections, payment plans, debt consolidation options. London sat beside me, laptop open, ready to take notes. This is ridiculous, our mother protested. I'm not a child. No, you're an adult who needs to learn financial responsibility. I tapped the first spreadsheet. Let's start with your current income and expenses. She slumped into the chair. Fine, but I don't see why London needs to be here. Because I'm involved too, London said. We all are. I pulled out Virgil's lawyer's letter. Let's address the elephant in the room. $50,000, Mom. How did it get this bad? Her fingers trembled as she reached for the letter. It started small, a few hundred here and there from the business account. Virgil never checked the books himself. And? And then I lost some money at the casino. I thought I could win it back. She wouldn't meet our eyes. Then I started borrowing from other accounts to cover the losses. Gambling addiction, London said softly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Mom's head snapped up. I'm not an addict. When was the last time you played? I asked. Her silence was deafening. Yesterday, she finally whispered. On my phone, just a few dollars. I pulled out another document. I found a Gamblers Anonymous meeting that meets 3 blocks from here, Tuesday nights. I don't need. Yes, you do. London's voice cracked. Mom, please, we're trying to help. By humiliating me? By making me live like a prisoner in my own house? This was your house, I corrected. You lost it, just like you're losing everything else. She started to rise, but I grabbed her wrist. No, you don't get to run away this time. Sit down and face this. Something in my voice must have reached her because she sank back down. Here's the deal, I continued, pulling out a new agreement. I'll help you negotiate with Virgil's lawyers. I'll even consider adjusting the rent if you meet certain conditions. Her eyes lit up. What conditions? First, GA meetings, twice a week minimum. I pointed to each item as I listed it. Second, you surrender your phone and install a gambling blocker on any new one. Third, financial counseling with me every Sunday. And fourth, London added, you tell us the truth about everything. Starting now, I said. What really happened to Dad's life insurance money? Mom's face crumpled. I I lost it, all of it, at the tables in Atlantic City. How much? $200,000. Tears rolled down her cheeks. It was supposed to be for your college funds. London gasped softly beside me. That's why you started taking out loans in our names, I said, to cover what you'd lost. She nodded miserably. Okay. I took a deep breath. Here's what we're going to do. I've worked out a payment plan that covers everything. Virgil, the loans, the credit cards, my rent. But it only works if you stick to it absolutely. I slid the budget across the table. Her eyes widened at the strict allocations. This leaves me almost nothing for gambling? That's the point. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Virgil's lawyer right now. We're going to conference him in and start negotiating a settlement. As I dialed, Mom reached across the table and grabbed my free hand. Why are you helping me? After everything I've done? Because watching you self-destruct isn't the revenge I want anymore. I squeezed her hand, then let go. But this is your last chance, Mom. Break this agreement, and I'll let Virgil's lawyers handle everything. The phone rang, and a receptionist answered. While we waited to be connected, I watched my mother's face, really watched it. Behind the careful makeup and practiced charm, I saw something new, fear. Not of us or the consequences, but of herself. Thank you, she whispered.
Don't thank me yet. I straightened my papers as the lawyer came. It was just beginning. London reached over and squeezed my arm, a silent show of support as we prepared to navigate this new territory, because that's what this was, uncharted waters where revenge where accountability met compassion.
The lawyer's voice crackled through the speaker, and I watched my mother straighten her spine, ready to face her demons. Maybe this time, with both her daughters beside her, she'd finally win the battle against herself. 78 days sober, my mother announced at breakfast, proudly displaying her GA chip. And look, she slid a bank statement across the table. I made double payments this month. I reviewed the numbers while she fidgeted with her coffee cup. The past 2 months had brought subtle changes. She'd stopped wearing designer clothes, started cooking at home, picked up extra shifts at the cosmetics counter. Small steps, but meaningful ones. This is good, Mom. I handed back the statement. Really good. I've been thinking, she said, then hesitated. About the house. My grip tightened on my coffee mug. What about it? I want to help restore it, not with money, she added quickly, seeing my expression, but maybe with work. The garden needs attention, And I remember how much you loved the roses we used to have. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. London burst in, waving papers. Mom, Sasha, look what Edward just sent over. She spread the documents on the table, release forms from Virgil's lawyers. The settlement we'd negotiated was finally official. It's done? Mom's hands shook as she touched the papers. He's dropping the charges? As long as you stick to the payment plan. London hugged her. You did it, Mom. We did it, she corrected, reaching for my hand. All of us. I let her hold my hand for a moment before pulling away. There's something else we need to discuss. Walking to my office, I retrieved a folder I'd been keeping for weeks. Inside was a new rental agreement, one I'd drafted with Edward's help. What's this? Mom asked as I set it before her. A lease, a real one. I sat down. 6 months, renewable if all conditions are met, including therapy sessions. But I'm already going to GA. This is different. I met her eyes. This is about us, about why you needed to control everything through money, about why I felt I had to punish you to be heard. London picked up the lease, scanning it. Family counseling? All three of us? All three of us, I confirmed. Because this isn't just about gambling or money anymore. It's about breaking patterns. Mom was quiet for a long moment, staring at the agreement. Finally, she looked up, eyes glistening. You're right, about all of it. I've been so focused on not being like my mother that I became something worse. You're not worse, London said softly. You're getting better. And this is part of that, I added, pushing a pen toward her. Sign it, Mom. Let's try something new. She signed without hesitation, then stood up. Can I show you something? We followed her upstairs to her room. From under her bed, she pulled out a shoebox filled with papers. These are all my secrets, she said, opening it. Account numbers, passwords, debts I never told you about. Take them. I don't want to hide anymore. I stared at the box, remembering the little girl who used to hide money in books, who grew up to document every broken promise in a leather notebook. Keep it, I said, but let's go through it together, all of it. Later that evening, Archer and Natasha came over to help us start the garden restoration. As we cleared weeds and turned soil, Mom told stories about the roses she and Dad had planted, about teaching me to deadhead flowers, about the garden parties she'd hosted before everything fell apart. We could do that again, London suggested, wiping dirt from her face. Have people over, make new memories. I'd like that, Mom said quietly. If Sasha agrees. I looked around at our work, the freshly turned earth, the careful plans for new plantings, the foundation we were building together. Yeah, I said, I think it's time. The sun was setting as we finished for the day, casting long shadows across the yard. Mom lingered by the flower beds while everyone else headed inside. Sasha? She called softly. Thank you, not for the house or the lease, but for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. You never deserved to be given up on, Mom. I joined her by the garden. You just needed to hit bottom before you could start climbing back up. She nodded, touching a remnant of an old rose bush. These will bloom again, won't they? With care and time, I said, understanding we weren't just talking about flowers. Everything can bloom again. We stood there as darkness fell, mother and daughter, surrounded by the promise of growth. Not everything was fixed. There were still therapy sessions to face, trust to rebuild, patterns to break. But for the first time, I felt like we were both fighting for the same thing, a chance to grow something beautiful from the ashes of what we'd burned down.